Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mr. Spatula Goes to the Movies. I am Jim, aka Mr. Spatula, and I am hoping to be your guide through the latest cinematic and theatrical releases that are appearing at your local multiplexes or independent cinemas in the coming months. I was inspired to create this channel. It's a new channel from my own euphoric almost experience of returning to cinemas after 6 months or so of lockdown and of closed screens. It was an important and quite emotional moment, really, for me to get back into the cinematic experience, to go through those doors into that dark sanctuary that is so important to me. To sit down, empty seats either side of me this time, guaranteed. That's one. Every cloud has a silver lining, I suppose. And to watch a story be projected up in front of me on that silver screen, it was a very special moment for me. And I hope if you too are passionate about going to the cinema, that this channel will be a place that you can come to see one opinion at least of the new things that are out, because I know there's a lot of stuff coming out on video on demand. There's a lot of things on Netflix, on Amazon Prime, on all of the sorts of platforms that originally were perhaps slated to be released theatrically, but have it's been decided for them to be released at home, and that's fine. I have no problem with people watching films the way they want to watch them, but for me personally, the cinematic experience is king, so I'm really excited to get into that. Now, I know there will be those of you out there who, for whatever reason, will not feel comfortable going back to the cinema yet. Perhaps they're not even open where you are, or perhaps you are in an at-risk group or sheltering, or simply it's not something that you're comfortable doing yet. And if that's the case, then I hope that in the months to come, these reviews will be useful for you when the films come to you in your home theatres. But for those of you who are going back out there, welcome. Now, the first film that I'm going to be reviewing for this channel will be one of the biggest releases of the year. In fact, it was slated to be one of the biggest releases of the year even before the whole situation hit and many films decided to release at home. That is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. It released here in the UK on Wednesday the 26th of August. I know it's not out in America for another week or so. However, I went to see it the very first night that it premiered here in the UK. I went to an IMAX screening. Well, I say IMAX, Limax, digital IMAX, which still, it did look fantastic. It was very, very bright and clear and sharp, and the sound especially was very loud. We'll get to that later. But it wasn't the 1570, film IMAX, proper IMAX as I like to call it, which I'm sure would be even more impressive from a visual standpoint. If you do have a chance to go and see it in that format, I would absolutely recommend it. I've not seen it myself in that format, but I did see a lot of stuff in 1570 IMAX. I saw The Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar in all those formats. I saw Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol in that format as well. It's an experience beyond anything you can imagine at the regular cinema. So if you do get a chance, I would highly recommend going to see it in 1570 IMAX. From a purely technical standpoint, that's not an endorsement of the film yet. I will get through the review. However, I would like to get out of the way first and foremost, full disclosure, that I am a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I've been a cheerleader of his for something going on 20 years now, ever since I saw Memento when I was 15 years old. Gives you some indication of how old I am now. I had that movie on VHS after I'd seen it at the cinema, and I wore the tape down so much that I watched it, and I tried to rewind it and watch it in reverse as well at some point, so that didn't go quite as I had planned. So I was a big fan of his all the way through. Yeah, I saw Insomnia. I loved Batman Begins. In some ways, Batman Begins is still my favourite of the Dark Knight trilogy. Because I remember being just blown away by it when I went to see it for the first time. And I think The Dark Knight was really that moment where Chris Nolan broke through the popular consciousness as the premier blockbuster auteur of his day. The Spielberg, if you like, the new Spielberg, although slightly more intellectual, a bit more the head than the heart than Spielberg. And I just love his style. I love the way that he films things, the way his films mess about with time, explore big concepts, explore ideas about reality and about identity and about time and about space. I just love the philosophical sort of look that his movies take on the world. And I like his editing style. I like the way that I love his music in the films. His partnership with Hans Zimmer has been great over the years. And Inception, I think, was possibly one of my favourite films of the last decade. So that gives you some idea of where I'm coming from. So you're aware of my biases before I start, and hopefully that will inform you as to what my review is going to be based on. So I'd like to get out the way first and foremost that these reviews, I'm going to be aiming for a spoiler-free review here. That's not going to be as hard as I originally thought it was going to be. Now I've seen the film, and I'll explain that in a minute. But if you are worried about spoilers, I will do my very, very best to keep it spoiler-free. I may mention stuff that obviously has come up in the trailer, and stuff that just sets the scene, so it's not going to be completely spoiler-free. I will mention actors who are in it and characters and the general themes of the film, but I'm not going to spoil anything big, so don't worry about that. So without further ado, it's time to get into the review. And if I could condense it down, I think I could sum up my feelings towards this film in just one word: disappointed. It pains me to say that. It really does, because I was anticipating this film as much as anybody. I was really, really looking forward to it, and maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe my expectations were too high. I don't know. But I've really liked most of Christopher Nolan's other films, and I've loved quite a few of them. So I was on board for this. I thought this was going to be my cup of tea, and it really, really wasn't. And I will explain as best I can throughout the review, but I've seen some reviews, negative reviews out there already of the film since I watched it, that harp on some things which I've seen in negative Nolan reviews before. So if you're thinking, oh, he's just coming from that place, he's one of these people that thinks that Nolan is a cold, chilly filmmaker, and doesn't put humour in his films. I think IndieWire said that it was humorless, and the Guardian 2-star review noted that it was cold and unemotional. These are not problems that I've had with past Christopher Nolan films. In fact, I found some of them to be quite funny in places, and the accusation of being cold and unemotional, I think, is unfair. Certainly he's not schmaltzy as a filmmaker. I made the Spielberg comparison before, and Spielberg, one of his main flaws in many of his films, I think, is the over-emotional schmaltzy nature of them. I'm not a Spielberg hater, by the way. I do love lots of his movies, but that is a problem in some of his films. Nolan just takes a different approach. His films are more intellectual. They are more about the head than the heart, some of them, but I don't think that makes them unemotional, and I don't think that's a problem. I think that Inception, for example, is very cerebral. However, it's got a strong through line there with the idea of Cobb's relationship with his kids, and that wonderful scene at the end where Inception finally happens, where Cillian Murphy goes into this room, and I've just made a reference to it now if you didn't realise, and he has that moment of catharsis where he realises his father, or it's actually not real, but he realizes that his father wasn't disappointed in him so much as he was disappointed that he wanted to be following his footsteps rather than creating his own thing. Moments like that in past Nolan films, and Interstellar, really emotional film and quite powerful as well in that regard, I think. So it's never been an issue of mine with Nolan, and this film, I think it does have issues in terms of your emotional connections to the characters. But I wouldn't describe those issues as it being chilly or cold. I think I think they're much deeper issues actually, which I will go into. However, firstly, let's look at the good stuff, because I think, it's not. I was going to say it's not a bad film, but I was really disappointed, and I do think it might. I usually rate films on a scale from 1 to 10, and I really mark 5 as average. I don't do the sort of IGN marking of like if it comes below 7, it's the worst thing ever. 5 for me is an average, and I would probably give Tenet a 5 at a push. I would say there are major issues with it, and so it's not just a good film that's not as good as Nolan's other films, in my opinion. I think it's a deeply flawed film, but there are good aspects to it, and I will talk about those first. Firstly, the performances, the acting, and the work that the cast do in this film is really good. Not one performance rang false for me. I thought that John David Washington in the main role had a real sort of cool suaveness to him, and was very likable, I thought, and charming in his role. Robert Pattinson, similarly, I thought did great work, and I've not been a fan of his in the past, I think just because the main thing I'd seen him in was Twilight, which I hated. But he's really one of the highlights of this film. Kenneth Branagh is chewing the scenery and hamming it up to 11, but he's having a great time. And he's very enjoyable to watch. And I think one of the real standout for me in this cast was Elizabeth Debicki, who I thought gave a really, if you're looking for emotion in the film, her character is where you would find it. And I think she was the one spot for it where I was like, okay, I'm feeling something here. And I connected, I think, with her character more than I did anybody else in the film. I thought she did a great job. And they're the 4 sort of main ones that I think everyone's going to be talking about. The rest of the supporting cast, none of them were bad. They all gave good performances. It was well acted. It was well acted and well performed, and I can't fault that at all. The other good points about it was the way it looked, the cinematography by Hoyt van Hoytema, I think it is, who's been Nolan's DP since Interstellar, when Wally Pfister went off to do his own thing. The cinematography was stunning. I think it was filmed in 70mm and IMAX, so the image on my digital IMAX screen was pin sharp from what I could see, and the composition of the shots and the canvas on which it is painted is very broad and very impressive, and it looks great, so I would say that as well. Some of the action and effects are brilliant. I love Nolan's, I was going to say this earlier about his style, I love the way he relies more on practical effects than he does on CGI, and it shows up in the film. So there's some fantastic sequences which look really good and have a real sense of weight and reality to them, especially the scene, this is in the trailer, but do fingers in ears if you don't want to hear, the scene where the crash a plane into a terminal building is very impressive. And there's other sequences too which have a real sense of reality to them, and I thought were very good. So I liked the action, I liked the effects, and I liked the cinematography, and I liked the grounded reality feeling to it, and I liked the performances. And that's about where the good stuff ends. And this is where I need to get into the negatives of the film. And the main negative of this film for me was that it was just a mess narratively. And I know, people may have come out of Inception or something like that and said similar things, but I had no idea what was going on in this film half the time. It moved so quickly, and it was edited so fast, and the dialogue was so mumbled and quiet, and exposition was given in such a off-the-cuff way that you couldn't follow what was going on. Half the time you couldn't hear the dialogue because the sound mixing was so bad, And I think this is a problem which has been in some of Nolan's films before. I mean, I'm not, I didn't have rose-tinted glasses about them. He has had his issues in the past. Number one is that his direction of action, I don't think, is great. His choreography of action scenes can be confused, and you can often have trouble knowing what's going on really in a geographical sense as in his action scenes. I think this came up most in Inception. If you look at the scene with the snow, in the snow with the snow mobiles and the men in skis and machine guns and all that sort of stuff, it was very difficult to tell who was who and what was going on. And he just doesn't have that flair for action that someone, for example, like James Cameron or Steven Spielberg even has, where they're competent action directors. Nolan falters there a bit, and it really comes to the fore here. But the editing in this film is just so haphazard and all over the place. There's no downtime to anything. You don't get a chance, as you do in some of his previous films, to take a breath and, allow the exposition to come through naturally and to come through in a digestible fashion that you can understand what's going on. It's just 100 miles an hour the whole film at 100 decibels as well. I mean, it's so loud that you can't hear what people are saying, and there's crucial lines of dialogue that are just thrown off the cuff and never come back to again, and you're like, what was that? Dunno. Was it important? Yep, but you're not hearing it again, and you've no idea what's going on. It's a real issue, and it's more than just not being able to hear it. It's not having the time and the space to absorb what's going on. I think it would have been better as like a mini-series, because the plot is so dense and everything is so jam-packed in there that you feel that he's just rushing and cutting out all of the silences and the dead space in order to get through the story. And the film suffers as a result. And you're sort of thinking, well, if that last 5 minutes had been a sort of 40-minute episode of a mini-series, this could have worked, but this is just too much. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's who. The characters are, on the most part, unengaging. I didn't really care about any of them. Like I said, the Elizabeth Debicki's character was the one character that I felt something for, but even that was, limited compared to my connection to other characters in previous Nolan films and in just any other film in particular. They just feel like chess pieces on a board that are being moved around to facilitate plot developments that I don't even understand. It's like a chess game being played at 5 times the speed. It's like, I'm sure it logically makes sense somehow, but I can't follow it, and I don't care who's getting caught or what piece that was, or I can't tell how anyone's interrelated to each other. The characters are just, everything is said in a very matter-of-fact way. I'm not feeling much of an emotional journey for anything going on, especially the John David Washington character. Like I say, I think his performance is very good, but the way the script is written and the way the film is edited is, he doesn't go on a journey. It doesn't feel like he's going on an emotional journey, which is what you want when you're watching a film. For example, when he first discovers the secret of inversion, which is in the trailers again, in which some object and eventually some people in the world move backwards through time instead of move forwards through time, you'd expect his reaction to be sort of, oh my god, this is amazing. It's like, imagine what you could do. How did this happen? What's going on here? But you don't get that sense of awe or sense of shock through him. He's just sort of like, oh, right, okay, right, that's how it works. Well, let's go on. And then they go on at 100 miles an hour again. And you can't tell what's happening. The score is good, but very, very, very loud. Again, you suffer because you can't hear what the dialogue is being said. The action is confused and difficult to follow. Especially the end of the film, which involves a very large action sequence involving lots and lots of people on a sort of mass scale. You can't tell who's who. I mean, there's literally a moment in the film, this isn't much of a spoiler, there's a moment in which they dictate, they're sort of like, okay, you guys are in the blue team and you wear blue armbands, and you guys are in the red team and you wear red armbands. So you think, okay, this is a visual way of letting us know who's who, because they all wear masks as well, which one means you can't tell who's who facially, and also means their voices like this and you can't tell what they're saying. But it doesn't help, the armbands are tiny, and for most of the time the camera's shaking around so much that you still can't see who's who. The intercutting between different scenarios happens so quickly that it's difficult to follow. I swear the film breaks the rule of crossing the line, so to speak, in terms of the line which is meant to be 180 degrees, and you're not meant to cross the camera line because it confuses, everyone switches places. I swear that happens all the time. It's just really unintelligible and difficult to follow, and for me it killed the film. I was a third of it in when I realised I wasn't enjoying it, because I'd been so amped up for it, and I was like, okay, go with it. You got to pay attention for a Nolan film, you know, you sort of put the work in and you'll have a good time. And then there was a point where I was just like, no, I don't know what's going on, I'm not having a good time, I'm not enjoying this. In fact, and this is really the bad thing to say, I'm bored. I was bored. I was checking my watch, and I think that says everything, really. So I'm bummed out about it. I didn't think it was good. I'd almost say it was bad. It was not a good film, and I just had no connection to what was going on, and I had no desire at the end to go back and watch it again to see if I could understand it better, which is unlike something like Inception, which was confusing, in which you felt like you were, you know, running along in your mind to catch up with what was going on, but you got to the end of it and it was satisfying, and you thought, I've got to see that again to pick up more from it. This is just like, I could see it again, but I still think I wouldn't have any idea what was going on. The central sort of threat in the film is not something that you can really visualize. It's, so they say in the trailer, they say sort of like, oh, we're trying to prevent World War III, and they say, oh, nuclear holocaust, and he says, no, something worse. And when you find out what it is something worse, but not something that you can really picture in your mind, and also something that you're struggling to even understand, and relies on a lot of sort of science fiction conceits, which are explained to you in mumbled voices hastily throughout the whole film, where you're like, okay, so, right, no, I still don't get that. I mean, I get that if he does this, then that's the end of the world. That's about as far as I can get with it, but it doesn't mean anything to me. These characters don't mean anything to me. The story doesn't mean anything to me. It's just nonsense. I can't tell you how much it pains me to say that. It's really, really disappointing. So, I think that's all I've got to say about it for now. I know lots of people are going to enjoy it. I'm sure they will. So I'm not telling you not to go and see it. I think it's worth seeing just to be part of the conversation, and if you are keen to get back to the cinema, it is a visual spectacle which, you know, is perhaps worth seeing on the big screen, but it's certainly Nolan's worst film in my opinion. His previous worst film, I would have said, was Insomnia with Al Pacino, or possibly his first film following, which I went back and watched a few years ago. But this is far worse than either of those, because in both of those films, at least, you had some sort of handle on the narrative through line of the film. You weren't just adrift in a sea of loud noise, which is what I felt like in this film. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe my mind isn't what it was, and I'm not following films as I should have done, or as I did in the past. You know, please comment below, let me know what you thought, let me know if you disagree. But and this is coming from a huge Nolan fan, I thought it was a real letdown, and kind of makes you question whether Nolan's previous films were as good as you thought they were, or as smart as you thought they were, or whether you just brought that to the table yourself, and then in this one it's revealed actually the Emperor has no clothes. Yep, disappointed. Let me know what you thought. See you next time.